Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sheriff's Mic, cleared to talk with me, your Sheriff, Corey Honea. When I started this podcast series, I said that from time to time we would go through significant cases that occur here in Butte County. And in December of last year, one of those significant cases occurred, a tragic case at the Feather River Adventist School in Oroville. It was a shooting. And today I'm joined by our lead detective, Sergeant Tristan Harper. He oversaw the investigation into that shooting for my office. And I think this is a good opportunity for us to spend a little time going into depth as to the pre-planning involved in that shooting, the motivations of the suspect, and also what we did to make sure that the person who gave him the firearm, or at least sold him the firearm, was held accountable. So, Sergeant Harper, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, first off, I think it's good for everybody to have a little understanding of who you are and how you got into this mess that you find yourself in right now.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your law enforcement career and what got you to this point right here.
So, interestingly enough, I was born in England.
Wow.
And I ended up in the United States through my stepfather being in the Air Force. And I grew up on Beale Air Force Base and in the Wheatland, California area. After high school, went to the Marine Corps, got out, went to the Fish and Game Academy, and that's where I met you for the first time, and decided to become a deputy sheriff, and it's been there ever since.
Fantastic. And you, I didn't know, I don't think I remember from your background that you were born in England. How long did you live there before you came back to the United States?
I was 5 when I flew across the pond.
So you don't have much of a memory of that? Is that?
No.
Okay, fair enough. And you went to the Fish and Game Academy. Was your desire to be a game warden?
Yes, it was.
Okay, all right.
It was going to take too long to finally get a position, so I wasn't going to wait around.
Well, good. I'm glad that the state's loss is our gain, and certainly glad. So you worked patrol for a while, and then you went into investigations and worked as a detective, and then I promoted you to sergeant after you did some incredible work there. And then when we had an opening in the detective bureau to oversee it, you seemed like the logical choice, and it's worked out really well for us. So I appreciate the great work that you do.
Thank you for the opportunity, Sheriff.
For sure. So, December 4th, 2024, right?
That's it.
Start off with what were you doing when you first were alerted to what was going on out at the school?
So at that time, I was a patrol sergeant, and I was off duty. I was actually in my Suburban with my wife and kids, and we were en route to Red Bluff to get some groceries or whatever. Yeah. But I got a phone call from one of my off-duty deputies, Deputy Wise.
Okay.
And he said, "Sergeant, do you want me to respond to this call?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he had his radio on, and I could hear some radio traffic about some first aid being applied to a child. And it was made known to me that there was a school shooting. So absolutely respond in. I turned around and headed to work.
Okay. And I'll tell you where I was. I was at a command staff meeting, and I had stepped out to take a phone call. And when I got off the phone call, I saw all of the members of the command staff rushing out of the building, heading to their cars, getting there. And as they were leaving, one of our lieutenants, Lieutenant Brazzi, informed me of what was going on. At that point, I jumped in my car and responded as well. When there is a active shooter incident, or God forbid, a shooting at a school, it really is an all hands on deck approach. I mean, everybody rolls that way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it has not only just being a deputy sheriff, you have the obligation to respond, but you also have that emotional response too, where you are committed to going.
Absolutely. What's interesting about that, there's a couple of things from my perspective that, in retrospect, I'm really thankful for. One is we've had a lot of conversations at the Butte County Sheriff's Office about what the response should be to an active shooter, what the expectations of the department are, what the expectation of the community. And regrettably, there have been jurisdictions and agencies in the past who have failed to respond adequately to those kinds of situations, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I remember specifically after the incident in Uvalde, Texas, when there was a failure to go in immediately and address that. We had conversations about that at the sheriff's office, right?
We did.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I think we put on some training to make sure that everybody understood what the expectation was and what the training was, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so as a result of that, when you have one of those instances, you don't wait for a SWAT team to get to assemble, right?
No.
You don't wait for every cop on duty to arrive so that you can develop a plan and move in, right?
No.
What's the response?
You go now.
Go now.
And you stop the threat now.
Absolutely. And interestingly, as I was responding, I could hear our people, as well as allied law enforcement agencies, responding, and they had already gone in to start to address the threat and deal with the injured, make sure that scene was secure. For me, what that allowed me and the other members of the command staff to do was to start thinking about what the next steps were. We didn't have to worry about the initial response because our deputies, our sergeants, our fellow law enforcement agencies were taking care of what needed to be taken care of first and foremost, which was get in there, find the shooter, deal with the shooter, and then start dealing with the casualties, right?
Right.
Yeah. That allowed me and other commanders to start thinking about, okay, what are we going to do in terms of reunification with the kids? How are we going to handle the investigation? I knew that there was going to be significant media inquiry. How are we going to address that? And how are we going to communicate and reassure our community that the situation was being brought under control, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as it turns out, the first law enforcement officer on scene was a member of the California Highway Patrol, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And he did not hesitate to go in.
No.
Went in by himself. He was alone. And as soon as he heard what was going on, he went in and ultimately found the shooter who had taken his own life after he shot two students, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So, props to that officer. Clearly,
Absolutely.
a lot of courage there.
Yes.
And his training came in. And so really, really respect that. But our deputies arrived on scene within minutes of us getting the call, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know how long it took us to get there?
109 is when the sheriff's office dispatch got the call for service, and 110 is when the CHP got there, and 114 is when the first deputies arrived on scene.
Yeah, and so literally within 4 or 5 minutes,
Yeah.
we have deputies from the sheriff's office arriving on scene, and deputies were coming from all over the county, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a full-on response. When our deputies arrived, obviously the shooter in this case took his own life, but that doesn't mean that our response doesn't necessitate checking to see whether there are other people involved, right? At that point, we didn't know, correct?
Absolutely. And you don't know if there's more threats at the campus still. So those deputies had to clear every room and place that a human being could hide
Right.
to physically ensure that there was no other threat on that campus.
And also start taking care of the kids and the staff there, the faculty, right?
Right.
Getting them. So do you? What was that like? What did our staff do? What did law enforcement officers respond? What did they do when they initially arrived to deal with those two critical issues?
So when they arrived on scene, they communicated with the CHP officer on scene, and they went to the shooter and observed him that he was dead, and then they began searching each room and looking for potential other threats. After that, the deputies started gathering the children, accounting for them. They're talking to the teacher, how many kids are in your class? They're counting how many kids are in the class, and they're assembling those kids in a safe spot.
Now, unfortunately, this coward who went on campus and targeted children fired shots and wounded two of the kids, right?
Right.
And both of them were in kindergarten, correct?
Correct.
Young boys.
Yep.
Both of them seriously injured.
Correct.
And what steps were taken by law enforcement immediately to deal with that?
So law enforcement immediately began providing life-saving first aid, which included placing chest seals on these gunshot wounds.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I got there, by that time, EMS and fire had arrived also. They were part of the process of treating the boys, and they had been transported to area hospitals to receive that more advanced treatment. But one of the things that sticks in my mind is the little tennis shoes from one of the boys still on the ground near a pool of blood. That really brings it home to you as to what transpired. Just, an innocent kid out for recess playing, and this guy comes on there and targets them. It's shocking. It's jarring, right?
Absolutely. And as a father, I have, children that age. I can't imagine just the pain and suffering those kids went through, hearing that physically, going through that, the teachers. And then also as a law enforcement officer, I wasn't on scene when that happened. But, this is a worst nightmare scenario for law enforcement, but it's what law enforcement is trained to do.
Yeah, yeah. So fortunately, they both survived, correct? And do you have an update on what's going on with the boys?
Yes. So Elias, he is making positive progress in his recovery.
Great.
Which is good. And Roman is also doing well per his guardian, both physically and emotionally right now.
That's good. I suspect there's going to be a long road to recovery, both physically as well as emotionally, and it's just really tragic that they have to deal with that. But the other students too, the fact that they were present when that happened and had to witness that, that's going to have long-lasting and really negative impacts. It's unfortunate. Yeah, staff as well feel very saddened by the fact that they had to ultimately deal with that. But I think it's good to go through these cases and kind of delve into what the suspect in this case did, perhaps his motivation for doing it, and what we did in response to that. Not so much out of a morbid curiosity, but more about trying to understand how these things happen in the hopes that we could prevent it, but also letting our community understand some of the challenges we face, but also what we do to try to keep these things from occurring, and if they do, of course, how we respond. Right?
Right.
Yeah. The incident on December 4th was the culmination of a lot of planning on the part of the shooter, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you know, based on the investigation, when he started planning this event?
So I would say it would have been at least the beginning of around January, the beginning of 2024.
Okay.
And I say that because we know that the shooter had contacted not only this school, the Feather River Adventist School where this shooting happened, but also another school trying to take a tour of the campus.
Yeah.
And in fact, the other campus where a shooting, thank God, did not occur, the suspect had done a tour of that campus.
So let's go into why that's significant, because on the day of the shooting, he actually had an appointment to meet with a school official, correct?
That's right, yeah.
That he had set up a couple of days before that, correct?
I don't remember how many days before, but he had called under the ruse that he was interested in having his grandson attend the school, and his alleged daughter had moved to Gridley.
Yeah.
So he wanted to enroll the school.
Which was a lie, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, he did not have a grandchild.
No.
Daughter had not moved there.
No.
So he calls with this story
Right.
that he wants to tour the school.
Yeah.
And he meets with a school administrator. And how did that meeting go?
So the suspect was on campus for almost an hour leading up to the time of the shooting. And at that time, the shooter's asking questions about religion, the size of the school, and things like that.
Which would give the fact that it's a Christian-based school, private school, those kinds of questions wouldn't necessarily raise any alarm bells on the part of the school administrator, because those are the kind of things that somebody interested in enrolling a grandchild or child in would probably ask, right?
Right, yeah.
How many teachers there are, how many kids there are, those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. In retrospect, though, those kinds of questions could also be utilized to assess the hardness of that particular target.
Absolutely. The shooter was doing target analysis. He was studying this place he was about to victimize.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, he decided to launch his attack at the conclusion of that meeting. One of the things that is so striking to me, and we have some video surveillance of him there, right?
Right.
The meeting concludes between him and the school official.
Right.
And it would appear as though he is walking out to the parking lot and the school official is walking towards the playground where the kids are. And that's when the shooter pulls out a gun, correct?
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that he didn't fire shots at the school administrator. You have any thoughts on that?
This shooter is a weak coward.
Absolutely.
And I think when someone studies a school or any target, they're analyzing, okay, what are their threats? What are obstacles that they're going to get in their way? And, maybe the shooter didn't think that maybe that school administrator was a physical threat to them based on maybe their age or physical size.
Yeah. I also kind of thought about the fact that he was a coward and he chose the most vulnerable victims there.
Absolutely.
2 young boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, after he begins shooting, he goes around the corner and takes his own life.
Right.
Just as the highway patrol officer is arriving.
Yeah.
My thought on that is that he didn't want to face somebody who had the ability to defend themselves and defend the rest of the kids that were there. So he chose to end his own life at that point.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So we talked about the pre-planning, and he had made a similar visit to another school here in Chico, basically using the same story, right? The same ruse,
Yep.
right? Yeah. And that was when? Do you remember that?
There was a few dates involved in that. I think he had tried to make an appointment, canceled, and then ended up doing an actual tour. That could have been around June of 24.
Right. So, well in advance, this is clearly, this guy is thinking about what to do. He's planning it. He's prepping it, that kind of thing. And in addition to that school, and then, of course, the school in Oroville, he had made an appointment at another school, correct?
In Red Bluff.
That was supposed to take place the next day.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
What does that tell you about this?
You can't help but think what was going on through his mind. Was he simply choosing the softest target?
Mm-hmm.
Was he choosing a target that was most convenient to him? Did he have a plan to go on a rampage and target multiple schools?
Yeah.
It's definitely very alarming.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I kind of evaluated that, I thought, the first school that he went to was located within the city of Chico, surrounded by neighborhoods. The response by Chico PD would have been very, very quick. Yeah. And at that point, he may have still been kind of formulating the plan. I think that when he got out to the school outside of Oroville, it was outside of the city. There was a fair amount of distance between that and any populated areas. I think he probably thought that the law enforcement response would be much longer than it would actually turned out to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And had he not decided to launch his attack at the Oroville school, very likely he would have done it the next day at the school in Red Bluff, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So law enforcement gets there. They obviously know that the shooter's down. He's no longer a threat. They've checked the school to make sure that there are no accomplices. They're rendering, medical aid to the 2 boys that suffered gunshot wounds. They have accounted for the other students and the faculty. That whole mechanism is up and going, and the response is what we've planned for, what we've trained for, and what we would expect under those circumstances, right?
Right.
Yeah. At some point, his body is searched, correct?
Yeah.
And they find the gun that he was armed with, but they also find a note, correct?
They do.
Yeah. And do you remember what that note said or have it off the top of your head?
I don't remember the per word, but in summary, what this note says is the shooter identifies himself by name. He refers to himself as a lieutenant of this national alliance, and that he's activated what he refers to as countermeasure. Essentially, he started the task to start executing children for this international alliance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a very odd thing, right?
Yeah.
I actually have the direct quote, and I'll read it because it right along with what you said. Countermeasures involving child executions has now been imposed at the Seventh-day Adventist School in California, United States, by the International Alliance. I, Lieutenant, and he gives his name, of the Alliance, carried out countermeasures in necessitated response to America's involvement in genocide and oppression of Palestinians along the attacks towards Yemen. So right off the bat, I think, we're puzzled by that whole thing, right? There's a lot going on in that whole statement.
There's a lot.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think we were all concerned about was, well, is there really something called the International Alliance, right?
Right.
Is this part of a coordinated attack, right? And are there other schools that are in jeopardy or potentially targets, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Were you aware of what was going on in terms of dealing with that part of the threat?
So the follow-up into this alliance, I can tell you that extensive hours were put into it, and nothing was found supporting this is a real group of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Consistent with what these beliefs are.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to get into that a little bit and talk about the efforts and, what resources were brought to bear with that. But I will tell people so that they understand that as soon as we found that note and became concerned that there might be other schools being targeted, we contacted all of the Seventh-day Adventist schools kind of in the Northern California region to let them know what was going on, let the local law enforcement know what's going on. I know here in Chico PD responded, got it locked down. Oroville PD responded to theirs. Paradise PD responded to theirs. So it was a really coordinated effort to make sure that those students were safe. We get back to this whole international alliance thing, right? Because this note has this specter of international terrorism, right?
Right. I read that and I think of there's a terrorist organization somewhere out in the world that has sent out a plan to people to go out and start executing children. That's what that reads to me.
100%. And the challenge for that is that if you're dealing with an international terrorist organization, pretty quickly outpaces the resources of the Butte County Sheriff's Office.
Absolutely.
Right. So what did we do? What collaboration, what partners did we bring in to help us run that down?
So immediately that day, we met with the FBI, Homeland Security Investigations, and the ATF, and we all worked jointly on this.
Yeah.
And they played a huge part in tracking down this alliance and ruling that out.
Yeah. So what's fascinating about that whole situation from an investigative standpoint is you got this entire investigation focused on determining whether or not the International Alliance is actually a legitimate terrorist organization, whether or not there are threats to other parts of the state or the country for that matter. And we bring in all those federal partners, and it literally turns into a worldwide investigation.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
What kind of things were being done on that front to deal with that particular threat?
So, leading into that, with this manifesto that the shooter had, he provided information about his recent travel, which included a flight to Istanbul and other parts of the country, which raised concern of recent travel to the Middle East and going further into this possible terrorist organization. So those federal agencies helped track down those travel patterns, when and where he was going places, and identifying persons of interest, which could be maybe someone that he repeatedly flew with.
Yeah.
Who is that person? And following up on those leads outside the United States to gather that information.
Yeah. So you mentioned the manifesto because there was the note found on his body, right?
Right.
And then later on, it was determined that he emailed or mailed what we have described as his manifesto, right?
Correct.
To a number of individuals and media outlets.
Right.
And when did we become aware of the manifesto? Do you remember?
I don't remember the exact time, but it was very quickly. There were, I'd say, a little under 10 that were physically mailed to people's houses, and we started getting reports of these coming in.
Yeah.
And then after that, we started learning this thing has been emailed out to a news company in Canada.
Right.
And through that investigation, we learned that he sent this thing all over the place, all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing, and I don't know if you remember being part of this. In the very early hours of the investigation, there was a lot of media attention to this, understandably, and a lot of concern on the part of the members of our community, absolutely understandably. And we made a decision at the sheriff's office to put out as much information as we could about what we knew at that point in the investigation, including information about the note that was on his body, right?
Right.
And there was a lot of debate about whether or not we should release that information that early in the investigation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The thought process being that, you don't want to inspire copycats. You don't want to give up potential investigative leads. You don't want to unduly panic your community. I mean, all those things were talked about, right?
Yeah.
But we ultimately pushed back on that and decided that we would release that, not knowing if he had sent something to somebody else, right?
Right.
Yeah. And as it turns out,
he sure did.
He sure did. Exactly right. And one of the things that we talked about a lot was that I didn't want to be in a position where if someone got that note or what turned out to be something more, and our community found out about it, and we hadn't told them first what we were concerned about, that we'd lose credibility.
Absolutely. I think there's something to be said about that transparency where you provided that information to the community, and then later, sure enough, it comes out from the community back to us, and they had already been informed of it.
Absolutely. It really, I think, set the stage for that. And I think ultimately set the stage in terms of how the community perceived our response to it in the investigation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the manifesto had more information in it than the note that was found on his body, right?
It did.
Yeah. And there is certainly information relevant to this whole international alliance, right?
Yeah.
And his assertion that these attacks are somehow connected to or resulting from America's response to what's going on in Palestine and so forth and so on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting because we're cops in Butte County, right? And now something that's going on in a whole nother part of the world, right?
Yeah.
That we have no control over, right? Is inspiring someone to commit a crime, a horrific crime in our jurisdiction.
Yeah. And it's interesting. The manifesto has so many different chapters to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a chapter about, Israel,
right,
and the shooter being upset about the Seventh-day Adventist Church supporting Israel, and he's upset about the genocide of children in Palestine. He even goes on to start talking about law enforcement and being upset that there's not enough cops with big biceps and abs, and it just goes downhill. Another thing that is interesting to me in the manifesto is how he specifically states in there that he does not have any type of mental problem.
Correct.
He clarifies that for everyone.
Right.
Which is interesting.
So I'll make this point, and then I want to talk about some of the other things you said, because I think it's also fascinating. One is, no matter what, when there is a terrorist act of violence, it becomes a local law enforcement problem no matter where it happens, right?
Right.
You can have this whole international, context and what's going on there. But at the end of the day, when someone perpetrates an act of violence, they're doing it in somebody's local jurisdiction.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And certainly we saw that with 9/11 in New York, but that was local firefighters, local cops that were the first on the scene. not to downplay anything that our federal counterparts did to work that, but it's your local law enforcement that are the first people on scene in any of those kinds, which is why, local law enforcement has to be properly trained and resourced, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the as it turned out, we found out that he was a bodybuilding enthusiast for a large portion of his life, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so it certainly gave him ideas and notions about people who didn't engage in bodybuilding.
Right.
Right. As a matter of fact, he was pretty critical about people who he thought were overweight and, right?
Right.
And he particularly targeted law enforcement and military people who he felt weren't physically up to the job.
Right.
Correct?
Yep.
Yeah. In addition to that, he certainly he's a misogynist. I mean, he was very critical of females, right, and made a lot of disparaging comments around females.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I want to get to the whole thing about him asserting that he didn't have a mental health problem. But one of the things I thought was interesting was he actually was self-aware enough to recognize that once we uncovered his rationale, his prior criminal history, he knew what we would say, which is you have an individual with mental health issues and a criminal background who decided to act out in this way, right?
Yeah.
He actually laid that out, right?
He did.
Yeah. And the fact that he laid it out doesn't make it, it was true. That's exactly what we ultimately found, right?
Yeah.
So the International Alliance was something that a lot of investigation was done to determine that it was not, in fact, a real terrorist organization that had targeted multiple locations, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
And the shooter, he was playing games with law enforcement. It was clear that his intent after the fact is that the law enforcement would read this manifesto and then would start conducting a very extensive investigation into what's going on. So he calls out law enforcement pretty much in this thing, saying law enforcement's weak, they're not going to do their job thoroughly, and by the way, I've set up some rabbit holes for you, so enjoy your trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Type of thing.
And it goes back to the fact that this guy clearly had been thinking about this and plans for a long time, because he wrote all this up. He starts getting into these planning missions, if you will, these surveillance operations. He obtained the gun, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. But you're absolutely right about the whole. He had absolute contempt for law enforcement, no doubt about that, and set up false red herrings, false trails, which required us to spend a lot of extra time chasing down leads that turned out not to be actual legitimate leads, correct?
Yeah, and I think the storage unit is one of the best examples of that. The detectives were searching everywhere for anything that he could be possibly associated to, a house, a storage unit, whatever.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there was a storage unit. And because of some of the shooter's history, we had concerns of his knowledge and abilities with bombs and explosives. So we had to really take that into account. So we did eventually search a storage unit in the shooter's name, and inside was a joke, pretty much. It was a sex toy.
Yeah, it was an FU to the cops.
And a note to the cops saying, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah. So I want to go back on that and talk about that, because that is a really, notwithstanding the fact that it was a false lead, a red herring on his, and as I said, an FU to the cops. The fact of the matter is, it illustrates some incredibly good detective work.
Absolutely.
Because we had no information that he had a storage unit, right? There was nothing that we'd found that suggested, but good old-fashioned detective work.
Yeah, this was sending large amounts of deputies on the streets, knocking on doors, looking at surveillance, and this wasn't fancy electronic, there was no fancy gear used. This was boots on the ground looking.
And that meant going to every single storage unit in the area and asking, do you have somebody renting a storage unit by this name or any of his aliases? Because he had a number of aliases, right?
He did, yeah.
Do you remember if the storage unit was under one of his aliases, was it not?
I don't remember.
Okay, all right. So ultimately, that required a warrant, and then we had to call the bomb squad out because he had intimated that there would be traps set for us, right?
Right.
And you're right. We found a sex toy that he had stolen from a local shop here, and a note, right? Yeah. Essentially mocking or taunting law enforcement. Right. Yeah.
And what's so frustrating about that is nobody wants to go home until we can all sleep good at night, knowing there is no other threat, there is no alliance, and the public's safe. We're not going to go home until that's done. So as we progress through the investigation and we stumble upon things like that, it's frustrating. And I think that's exactly what the shooter wanted.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that he wanted. One was he wanted to do what terrorists do, which is create fear and panic in a community, right?
Yep.
And his assertion that there were potentially other targets, I think, was designed directly to try to make people scared, right? To fear. And then for whatever reason, grievances that he had with law enforcement, perhaps because of prior convictions, prior arrests, things like that, he wanted to mock law enforcement or taunt law enforcement, maybe a better way to do that.
Yeah.
And that all went into this whole strange fantasy thing that he put together in his mind and then ultimately executed. The tragedy, of course, is that he shot two young boys and changed their lives forever. Right. Yeah. So while all that whole international alliance investigative stuff is going on, there's a whole bunch of other things that are going on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're working on, processing the crime scene and, tracking down his last movements and where he was and what he was doing and all those kinds of things. And the timeline that comes up is interesting to me because when did he end up back in Butte County? Because he had been out of Butte County for a while, correct?
Yeah.
When did he end up back in Butte County?
So it was around the 21st of November he gets back in the Chico area.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Where had he been prior to that?
So he had gotten arrested in the San Francisco area for being in possession of a stolen vehicle.
Okay.
And he had a fake California driver's license in one of his aliases.
Yeah.
So he gets arrested. He gets transported down to Southern California on a warrant for burglary.
Yeah.
Spends a few days down there, and then he ends up getting a Greyhound bus ticket from a sister and trips up to Chico.
Got it.
And he's pretty much camping out at hotels in the Chico area from November 21st through the night of the shooting.
Got it. So I want to unpack that a little bit. And clearly he had been planning something like this before leaving Butte County to ultimately, be arrested, transported down, because we know that he visited one of the schools in June, right?
Yeah.
But prior to this incident, there had been there had been no contact by the Butte County Sheriff's Office. He had not come to our attention at all.
Right.
And the vehicle that he stole was a U-Haul truck, right?
It was a rental, yeah.
Rental truck, yeah. One of the things I think that is interesting is we kind of learned that the guy was leading a nomadic lifestyle, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And would stay in hotels, would stay in shelters.
Yeah. You look at his criminal history, his pattern of arrests was not violent crimes.
Right.
It was thefts and property crimes. This guy made his money from stealing and scamming people.
He was a fraudster.
And that's what he did. He would travel around the world scamming people.
Which is also really interesting because in order to navigate international travel, especially when you're funding it on fraud and utilizing, fake IDs and things of that nature, that's a level of sophistication. It's not easy, right?
Yeah. I mean, he did federal prison time for giving false information on a passport.
Yeah.
Yeah, fraud was his gig.
It was his gig. And again, the fact that he was able to travel internationally and get to places like, he was in Mexico.
Yeah.
Get to places in, there was a trip to the Middle East, right?
Yep.
Right? Which all was woven into this whole narrative to try to give credibility to the International Alliance,
exactly,
right?
Exactly,
Yeah. So he hadn't been contacted by the sheriff's office in any kind of negative context, and hadn't come on to Chico PD's radar until he failed to return the U-Haul truck that he had taken down to San Mateo, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So he gets arrested in San Mateo. He's booked into their jail, but he's got a warrant for burglary out of
San Bernardino.
Got it. And San Bernardino comes and picks him up, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And how long is he in there, do you know?
He's not there very long.
Okay.
I think he's arrested in San Francisco on the 12th of November. He goes down. So by the 21st, between the 12th and the 21st, he's being arrested in San Francisco and already being released from San Bernardino.
Got it. Okay.
Short amount of time.
And he gets a bus ticket and he comes back to Butte County.
Right.
He lands here in Butte County. And it's that where he's basically going from motel to motel, kind of just doing his thing, right? The nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. But we have some information that he had probably obtained a gun prior to that, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we know when he obtained that gun?
In April of 2024.
Okay. Again, all part of this kind of pre-planning, because you talk about him visiting the school in June, but he'd already obtained a gun.
Right.
Yeah, and you got to wonder if he was taking the gun with him on those pre-planning trips, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I want to get into the work that was done to identify or deal with that whole piece in a moment. But I want to highlight how it was that we were able to recreate or put together his movements or figure out what his movements are from the time that he landed here on the 21st of November up until the shooting in December. And a lot of that had to do, again, with good old-fashioned police work, right?
It did, yeah.
What were the detectives doing?
So the shooter had a cell phone on this person. So detectives downloaded that cell phone and then identified the phone number, and we got phone records for the shooter. So those phone records would show us a general area of where the shooter had been in the days leading up to the shooting. Mm-hmm. So those aren't going to tell you which exact business or house he could have been at. So you got to get out in the streets and start knocking on doors and talking to people. So through that grind, we develop a very thorough timeline of where the shooter had been staying and how he traveled from Chico to the shooting scene.
Yeah, I mean, that includes literally just going to businesses and houses and saying, hey, do you have any surveillance footage? Do you have Ring camera footage? And pouring through all of that to see if we get glimpses of the guy, right?
It came down to persistence.
Yeah, absolutely right. Again, dogged, never give up, old-fashioned detective work. Right? And so you're able to put the movements away. And where was he staying? So on the day before the shooting, as we move into that, where is he staying at?
So the night leading into the morning of the shooting, he actually spent the night inside the Denny's here in Chico.
Really?
Yeah. From about 10 p.m., he's in Denny's and is awake in that restaurant.
Okay.
But the days before that, he was staying in hotels just a few blocks from where we're doing this right now. The New Haven, the America's Best Value, and there's another hotel he was staying at too.
Okay. And so he's in Denny's. What's the next thing? What's his next movement?
So after Denny's, he goes for a little walk about 2 blocks from here, and he gets on a Beeline bus, which is the community bus for this area.
Okay.
So he gets on that bus around 7:30 in the morning on the day of the shooting, and he takes that down to downtown Oroville.
Okay. And
these buses had surveillance cameras in them, so we could see what he was wearing. He's wearing like a coat, pants. He's wearing a bodybuilding belt at one point.
Okay, a weight belt.
A weight belt.
Yeah, okay.
He has a duffel bag, and we track his movements, again, on foot, knocking on doors. We see him get out of the Greyhound bus, and he starts walking southbound on Meyer Street through Oroville.
Okay. And we actually have video surveillance showing that, correct?
We have video surveillance of this stuff,
yeah. Okay.
So he takes that walk, and he ends up going to a grocery store in Oroville, and he goes inside and he purchases some energy drinks.
Okay.
And then after that, he ends up ordering an Uber ride directly to the school.
Right.
So that Uber driver picks him up, and he is taken to the school where the events unfolded from there.
Yeah. And the Uber driver had no clue what his intent was, right?
Right.
We tracked that down. Yeah. It was curious to us that there was no vehicle in the parking lot associated with the shooter when we got there. And so we had to track down that whole thing. And if I recall correctly, the Uber driver had been involved in a minor traffic collision earlier that day. Is that right?
Yeah, when we reached out to him, he thought we were talking to him about a totally different incident.
Yeah, little did he know. Yeah, and that had to be really frightening for him as well once he figured that whole thing out. But again, an unwitting assistance provided by the Uber driver had no idea what was ultimately going on.
Right.
It also suggests to me that he didn't. I think he knew that he wasn't going to leave that school. He had no real viable getaway plan because he took an Uber there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so he gets there, he does the shooting. We've talked about what that ultimately looks like. And we find that he is armed with a handgun, correct?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that handgun.
So he had a Glock 19 semi-automatic 9mm pistol in his possession. And firearms have serial numbers on them.
Right.
And this had a serial number on the barrel, a different serial number on the slide, but the lower portion where you would grip the firearm, it had no serial number on it. It was what we refer to as like a polymer, homemade, unserialized.
Right. So it was a kind of a Frankenstein gun, if you will, an amalgamation of different guns from different things that were all put together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that certainly makes it challenging. And I want to stop here. So this individual was a convicted felon, correct? Could not legally possess a firearm.
Correct.
Right? So that told us that he very likely obtained the firearm illegally, either stole it or got it from somebody who sold it to him illegally.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, talk a little bit about how we ultimately determined, we traced that gun from where we found it underneath his body in Oroville to ultimately where he got it states away, correct? So the first thing is figuring out these serial numbers. Talk about that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. A lot of crimes involving firearms locally, the guns come from the general area.
Yeah.
And this case is very interesting because this gun came from out of state.
Okay.
And how we got there was the serial number came back to a person who is deceased, and we conducted some follow-up and learned that firearm had been sold by his widow to a resident in Arizona.
Okay.
And that gun was purchased lawfully in Arizona.
First thing. So
that first transaction.
So we know that gun, or at least parts of that gun, show up first with an owner in Arizona, state of Arizona.
Yeah.
Right. He dies.
Yep.
And his wife is selling off guns, right? As a matter of fact, we found out she sold a lot of those.
A lot of guns.
Yeah, a lot of those. And the first transaction was lawful under Arizona law.
Correct.
Right. Wouldn't have been lawful under California law.
Right.
Right. But lawful under Arizona law.
Right.
And so was the gun in its form with the polymer lower and the parts from two different guns, was that the way it was sold from the original owner's wife, widow, to the next individual who had it?
So at one point, this was a single firearm with consistent serial numbers.
For sure.
And that was bought from the dealer to the deceased subject in one piece.
Right.
And what we believe is that deceased subject, firearm enthusiast, assembled it like that himself.
Mix and match parts.
Right. Okay. And then when he passed, his wife sold off his guns.
Okay.
So she sells it to a gentleman out in Arizona, and that transaction was lawful in Arizona.
Right. So from there, that individual sells it to somebody else.
Right.
Correct? And how does that transaction take place?
So you want the short story or the long story on that?
Start with the long story.
So it wasn't as easy as just, conducting a record check on a serial number.
Not at all.
And getting all the answers. Yeah. This took some more technology to figure this one out.
Okay.
The detectives spent a long time reviewing cell phone records, which essentially is a piece of paper with a lot of numbers on it.
Correct.
And they'd started to notice some interesting things.
Okay.
But eventually what they found out was that gun was sold by the widow to the male half that we talked about, and then he sold it to another person.
Right.
And then that person sold it to the school shooter.
Right. And when you talk about the cell phones, my recollection of how that came to be is we were looking at the shooter's cell phone records and started seeing a number that was in common with the first person who purchased it after the original owner died, right?
Right.
So you start seeing this connection come together, right? And then from there, we start figuring out, well, why is the person who involved in the shooting in our case calling a guy that the guy who bought the gun from the widow is calling as well, right? That led us to it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but we spent a lot of time. We sent detectives to Arizona, spent a good amount of time working with local authorities, ultimately trying to track this down. And what we learned was the person in common, the person that sold the gun to our shooter, was also a convicted felon.
He was.
Right. And he did not obtain the gun legally.
Correct.
And was not in possession of the gun legally.
Correct.
Nor did he sell the gun legally.
Right.
Right. And that's how ultimately the person who wreaked so much havoc in our community was able to obtain a firearm. He was prohibited from having it, and he got it from somebody who was prohibited from having it.
A felon got a hold of a gun and sold it to another felon.
Exactly.
For $300 near a hotel.
Exactly. And it's this shady deal where they're looking on this gun trader app and connecting up with each other, and no questions are being asked, and it's all just really just kind of shocking to those of us in California, because that's not the way gun transactions are supposed to happen, at least in our state, right?
Right.
Yeah. But it's pretty common in Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm obviously not an officer in Arizona, but if you go to sell a firearm to someone and they present an Arizona state ID and they verbally vouch that they're not a prohibited person, then the sale is deemed lawful.
Yeah.
From my understanding.
Yeah, that's the way I understand it as well. But I want to get back to the thing, and I am supportive of people's Second Amendment rights. I'm supportive of honest, law-abiding, mentally stable individuals who want to have firearms for protection, for recreation, for whatever the purpose of having those. And we've talked a lot about that. And one of the tragedies, or one of the things that always happens in a tragedy like this, is that people start to go, well, we need more laws around gun possession and how guns are sold and traded and things of that nature. And what occurred to me is there were already laws that prohibited this from happening.
Yeah, it was still illegal.
Right. The shooter that came here broke the law, and the person who sold him the gun broke the law.
Right.
And I am constantly of the mind that why don't we start by enforcing the laws that are on the books before we decide if we need more laws?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And so for me, it was important to send our detectives all the way to Arizona and expend the resources, because I wanted to make sure that anybody who unlawfully assisted this guy, right, in causing this tragedy in our community was held accountable under the law as far as we could, right?
You made that very clear.
I did, didn't I? Exactly right. Exactly. We talked a lot about that, right?
We did.
And yeah, granted, we spent resources, but the guy in Arizona that sold, our shooter, the gun, needed to be held accountable. And it was incredibly, I'm so proud of the police work that was done to find that person. As it turns out, we ended up working with the Phoenix Police Department, right?
We did.
You guys got search warrants?
We did.
And what happened next?
So Phoenix Police Department, they're very helpful, spent a lot of time helping us out. So I want to thank them. But they spent the time to look at all the information that we had and to assist by conducting a search warrant at the subject's house. His name is Jesse Kitagawa.
Right.
That's the convicted felon that sold it to the shooter.
Yes.
And a search of his house was conducted pursuant to a search warrant. And we closed the loop.
Yep.
The detectives interviewed Jesse, and we we knew for certain that that's how the shooter got the gun.
Yeah, and he's being prosecuted by the Maricopa County DA's office, right?
He is, and that case is set for trial next month.
Okay, and we're going to certainly be monitoring that, watching that whole thing. One of the things, again, that I'm gratified by, that I'm proud of our response, I wish it hadn't have happened, is the fact that we did chase down every possible lead. We worked with federal partners to chase down this whole international alliance thing, and then ultimately determined that that wasn't a legitimate terrorist organization. We were put together the timeline. We figured out his motivation. We figured out what he did. I'm still just always curious about the fact how something going on internationally could creep into the psyche of an individual who is going to then utilize that to commit a crime here locally.
Yeah.
We saw something similar with the Bidwell Mansion arson fire, and I did a podcast with Mike Ramsey, and we talked a little bit about that. And then obviously we looked for anybody who may have assisted him knowingly, and this Kitagawa individual was one of them, and we did what we could to hold him accountable. I'm sure people may have noticed that we haven't disclosed the name of the shooter. That's not because we're trying to protect him. Far from it. Again, we think he's an absolute piece of crap coward.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to give him any notoriety or, have somebody look up to him in any way, because again, he's not worthy of that, and that's why we've not referred to him by name.
He doesn't deserve the recognition.
Not at all. He's a piece of crap. In retrospect, all of this, again, I just would never wish this upon any community. I hope we never have to deal with this kind of thing again. But when you look at it, I'm really glad that both boys have survived, recognizing that they've got a long road ahead of them still, but I'm hoping that they'll come through with it. The school, the faculty, I know that they've got a long road ahead, our community. But that said, I am really glad that the law enforcement community here in Butte County responded the way it did, rushing into harm's way, helping people, and then just not giving up on the investigation, just being dogged in the pursuit of justice. And I think this is a good example of that.
Yeah.
So as we close this thing out, you have any final thoughts or anything else that you want to?
I'm just grateful. It's extremely sad that this happened to these kids. It's heartbreaking. I'm grateful that there were no more victims. But I want to thank you for giving the detectives an opportunity to pursue those leads and close that loop. I think it's when these kids grow up, they know what happened.
Yeah.
They have that answer.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate your efforts, appreciate the efforts of all the members of our staff, allied law enforcement agencies. I am really gratified. I'm proud to be the sheriff of Butte County because I have great people that work for me, and you're certainly one of those. And I'll just disclose the fact that you were kind of voluntold to be on this podcast.
That's right.
Exactly. But you didn't complain at all. And I know this is a little outside your comfort zone. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. But you and I talked about this, and that is your recognition and willingness to do hard things because it helps you grow and become better. And we both talked about doing hard things. Every time you do something hard, something else gets easier and easier once you've accomplished that, right?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate you did a good job, my friend.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Very, very good. So, all right, folks, that's it for this episode of the Sheriff's Mic, Clear to Talk with me. I hope that you found this informative. If you did, please like and share and follow the podcast. Help us reach as many people as possible so that we can inform them about the great work that's being done by members of the Butte County Sheriff's Office as well as law enforcement agencies throughout the county. If you have a topic that you'd like me to explore or a guest that you'd like me to try to get on the podcast, you can email me at sheriffsmike@buttecounty.net. And until then, stay safe, stay informed, and as always, you're clear to talk.